Welcome back to Department 1, People vs. Robert Durst. Our jurors and alternates all are present. Mr. Durst is present with his lawyer, Mr. DeGuerin, Mr. Chesnoff, Mr. Lewis.
I want to apologize this morning. As I was preparing to leave, my basset hound got out, and I chased him around, and he got up into the dirt, and he thought it was very funny, and I couldn't catch him.
So he's got a sense of humor, your bastard.
It's embarrassing because he's got little tiny legs. If the Great Danes got out, it would be a little better.
Running away on purpose.
Doing us a little favor. All right, so we do have Mr. Lewin, Mr. Milius, Mr. Bailey, and let's resume our microphone on. Oh, that one makes no, that's silly. And Mr. Miata's here also.
May I begin, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Mr. Durst, did you have a chance yesterday after court, did you review anything, watch any video, read any transcripts since court yesterday?
Excuse me, no. Hey, the tablet, the print is too big.
The print is too big on your...
This is too big.
Okay.
All right, she'll adjust that.
Oh, no, I'm good. No, I'm fine. Thanks. No, I don't need any. I'm fine. Thank you. Is that better? I'll just say something so you can... Is that better?
Give me a second.
Oh. Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. I just wanted to see if she'd maybe dive over the seat to get back there.
It's okay now.
Okay.
Good. Let's take a breath.
Did you end up... If you didn't review anything, Mr. Durst, did you take any time to kind of reflect and think about any of your answers yesterday?
Yes.
Is there anything you want to change? Any answer that you've given that you had time to think about and maybe you think differently today?
I do remember playing board games with my parents and Douglas, and the board games that I remember were Go Fish and Checkers and Uno. My lawyers have told me that I'm making a mistake answering your question. Assuming that I killed Susan Berman, would you tell us? They say that's like asking me if I have stopped beating my wife.
So, wait, Mr. Durst, I just got to stop you. When you're talking about what your lawyers have said to you, because I didn't ask you that, you opened the door potentially for me to ask you about other conversations with your lawyers. So I just want to make sure that you understand when you're talking about conversations you've had with your lawyers, that's an issue. Do you understand that?
Not really. I don't see why I can't say my lawyers told me this, that, or the other thing.
No, you can say whatever you want, but I just want to make sure you understand that normally I can't ask you about a conversation between you and your lawyer unless you've talked about it, it was not private, etc. When you're up here discussing, my lawyer told me X, all of a sudden that means that I can very well potentially ask you about that conversation and related conversations with your lawyer. So I just want to make sure that, I know historically, Mr. Durst, you kind of do what you want to do.
Is this a question?
Well,
Does he ask him if he understands that?
Do you understand that?
Your Honor,
Yes?
may we have a moment to consult with our client, please, about the question of privilege? Or the court?
How about this? How about I instruct him to answer only the question? All right? The
Thank
question
you.
did not call for that answer, so don't answer only the question.
So, Mr. Durst, I just want to make sure. You answered the questions yesterday about if you had killed Susan, would you tell me? You said no. If you had killed Kathy, would you tell me? You said no. If you had murdered Morris, you answered the question and said no. You're not telling us today that your answer would be different. You're just saying you wish you wouldn't have answered the question. Is that correct?
I am telling you that the answer I gave you yesterday was correct.
Okay. So, Mr. Durst, I noticed, would you agree, during your direct examination, when you were answering questions from Mr. DeGuerin, you were able to answer much more quickly, even with your machine, than you've been able to answer my questions. Would you agree that that is true?
Two things happened since you started asking me questions. First, the judge told me not to answer so quickly, that I should wait for objections and wait for him to rule. And what was the second thing that happened? My lawyers told me to slow down.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that it's not that you're having difficulty reading or understanding me. You're just trying to take more time to answer. Is that correct?
More or less. But the fact of the matter is that your questions are much longer than Dick DeGuerin's questions on direct. The screen is still, the writing is still a little bit bigger than it was yesterday. But the way the writing was yesterday, sometimes your questions took up 6 whole lines of the tablet.
No one's ever accused me of brevity. So, fair enough. The other issue, though, Mr. Durst, is you don't know the questions I'm going to be asking, right?
Correct.
And in comparison, you went over your testimony with your lawyers, so you knew many of the questions they were going to be asking. Correct? Here, we can approach. It's
No, I don't think so. I'll allow it.
I went over some of the questions Dick DeGuerin was going to ask.
right. For example, yesterday you testified that you knew that Mr. DeGuerin was going to ask you, did you kill Susan Berman? You knew that in advance, correct?
I did.
Yesterday, when we were ending the day, I was asking you about your strategy for testifying. Do you remember me going into that area?
No, not really.
Well, so just to refresh, what I had brought up was that would you agree that in answering questions from Mr. DeGuerin yesterday, or 2 days ago, 3 days ago, when you've been testifying, that there are certain things that you want to get out and that you will answer those questions, not just answering what he asked about, but volunteering other information that isn't necessarily responsive. Do you agree you've been doing that?
Overruled.
There's certain information that I want to get out, and even if it's not a direct answer to the question, I will try to get out the information that I want to get out.
Mr. Durst, would an example of that be a couple of days ago, might have been yesterday, the days are kind of coming together for me, but you were asked a question about you and Kathy's, what you would do. It was either what was a typical day for you guys or what activities would you do in Vermont. And you went through and described it, and then you mentioned that, yeah, we would also get firewood with the bow saw. Do you recall bringing up the bow saw in that context?
I recall talking about heating with wood and having to use a bow saw and a splitter so that we had logs to put in the wood stove.
Would you agree, Mr. Durst, that that was information you wanted to get out about the bow saw because you are aware that you need to explain why you have bow saws in your possession for things that will happen later on after Vermont?
Overruled.
I was answering the question of what my life was like in Vermont. Sawing up wood was a major part of it, since the wood stove going through, they have names for it, how they describe a certain amount of wood, but the wood stove would use a whole lot of wood. So we spent a whole lot of time sawing wood and splitting wood.
So I guess the question would be, Mr. Durst, did you find it responsive to the question to bring up the bow saw when you could have just said, yeah, we would also gather wood? Or was that an attempt to, in advance, bring up a bow saw because you knew that, as an example, you had a brand new unopened bow saw in the back of your CRV when you were arrested in Galveston on October the 8th or 9th?
I brought up the bow saw because you use a bow saw to cut wood.
So you didn't bring it up because you were trying to think ahead and address the issue in a kind of seemingly innocuous fashion?
No.
All right, I want to talk for a moment about your general desire to kind of live your life according to your own rules. Would you agree with the idea that, in essence, you don't really believe that rules and norms apply to you, they apply to other people?
No, I do not believe. I do believe that the rules and norms do apply to me.
If you believe they apply to you, you would agree, though, that you kind of disregard them in a lot of areas of your life, right?
No, I do not disregard the rules and norms of society.
Do you agree that you've never had a problem misrepresenting or outright lying to get what you want?
I don't agree to that at all.
Now, you worked as the volunteer for Vista, which your attorney went through on direct examination. Do you recall that?
I do.
Now, in your question about working for Vista, do you recall that you mentioned how you used to help people get loans? You mentioned that I think you used the word cosign loans to help people with Vista. Do you recall testifying to that?
Yes, excuse me. One of the ways I would help the people who were clients of Vista, in addition to filling out the bank's forms, was that some of them I co-signed the loan for.
And you would agree, Mr. Durst, that a normal, typical Vista volunteer is not going to be able to co-sign loans because they're probably not wealthy like you are. You would agree to that, right?
I have no idea how rich the normal, typical Vista volunteer was or is.
Well, Mr. Durst, when you work for Vista, I assume in your training, they didn't tell you, hey, if you can, in addition to helping people get benefits, you want to personally sign loans for them. That's not what you were instructed, correct?
During the Vista training, they did tell us. The example they used was for automobiles as opposed to business loans. But they did say that was something we could and should do if we wanted to.
You're telling me they instructed Vista volunteers, many of them were young college students, right? Correct?
The Vista volunteers in the program I was in were primarily MBAs. Some of them had bachelor's degrees in business. I was in a PhD program in economics. All the rest had MBAs, and it was a special or a specific program for people who theoretically knew about business to help people who were in business.
But they're supposed to help people within the businesses they're operating. They're not supposed to co-sign loans for them, are they?
It was left up to the Vista volunteer who they wanted to work with and if they wanted to co-sign a loan.
My question to you is, you brought up, or your attorney, one of the two of you brought up the co-signing of loans. Do you recall that?
I do recall that.
And my question to you would be, did you bring that up because you were trying to make some points with the jury to try to say, I'm a great guy, I'm co-signing loans for people I hardly know? Was that the point of that?
It'd be easier for me to say, I'm a great guy.
Well, it'd be a little harder when they're hearing some of the other stuff about you involving pulling your wife.
That's a sidebar.
No, I haven't heard. Have you completed a question?
No, I was in the middle of it.
It was a comment. My objection is that it's a comment.
If it were just a comment, then I would sustain an objection, but I'm not sure that it wasn't becoming a question.
Mr. Durst, you just mentioned, well, I would just say I'm a great guy. But you're aware the jury has seen many instances of conduct by you that you would have to admit does not portray you as not only not a great guy, but a very nice person at all. Would you agree?
No, I would not agree.
Now, when you brought that up, when you answered the question, Mr. DeGuerin asked you about Vista, you didn't mention how you yourself ended up applying for food stamps through Vista. How come you didn't mention that?
I don't remember mentioning that or not mentioning that.
What are you telling this jury that that wasn't an intentional decision on your part to not mention that conduct because you knew it made you look pretty bad?
I did not mention that conduct because it seemed unimportant.
And you also testified, Mr. DeGuerin, you indicated that, or maybe it was on my cross yesterday, but you previously have testified that the reason that you got food stamps was because it was a requirement of working for Vista that you get food stamps. Is that right?
It was considered part of our salary. I could get them or not get them.
Well, Mr. Durst, you're aware, having worked in Vista, that Vista was a program for people who had financial needs and who needed food stamps for food. You had a trust and a large income. How would you have been able to get food stamps?
I filled out the forms as the director of the program told me to fill out the forms. At no point did I lie on the forms. The food stamps amounted to about 30% of the salary.
RD 403 12-12-10, page 261, lines 1 through 13.
Your Honor, this is a previous example. It's People's 269. Transcript, the actual portion of it is from, we could designate it from People's 269A as page 35.
Oh, yes. When I was in college,
Sorry about that.
You know, in most jury trials, there's not like 7 TVs. We're spoiling you guys for later.
And I will play it.
oh, yes. When I was in college, oh, yes, I went into Vista for a year after college, and we would help people get food stamps and like that. You know, if they can get them, why can't I get them? All you have to do is show them a bank account with zilch in it and sign a bunch of papers saying you don't got nothing, and I would get food stamps. And I got a big kick out of using food stamps.
Which part did you get a kick out of? Going into a store?
Yeah, I'm getting away with this. I'm beating the government.
Mr. Durst, in that exchange, you said that all you have to do is show them a bank account with zilch in it. You were a very wealthy man, so you would agree that for you to show them a bank account with zilch in it and to sign a bunch of papers saying, quote, you don't got nothing, unquote, that would compromise lies.
The questions were asked, how much money did I have in the state of California? And the answer to that was 0.
So what did you mean when you said that basically, well, if they can get them, why can't I get them? What did you mean by that?
Just what I said.
Well, weren't the reason that if they can get them, they're poor people who don't have enough to eat, you're a millionaire. Do you see a difference?
I see a difference.
And then you said that you got a big kick out of using food stamps. What did you mean by that?
I think the language speaks for itself.
And would you agree what that language speaks to is that you enjoyed, as you said, the idea that here was something you weren't supposed to get, you were getting it, and you liked the idea that you were beating the government, that you were getting away with it.
I was supposed to get it. It was part of my salary.
Right. Is it fair to say that you enjoy getting away with things, correct?
Not correct.
So the idea of doing whatever you want because you can, that is not something that you find very appealing?
Correct.
Now, I just want to make sure you don't blame your upbringing for this idea, as of you said, getting a big kick out of beating the government. That's not because of your upbringing, correct?
I think I misspoke when I said I get a big kick out of beating the government.
What did you mean when you say you misspoke? What did you intend to say?
I think I was going along with one of Andrew's hints.
When did Andrew, I'm trying to understand this, Mr. Durst, so how did he know to give you hints in advance to questions he hadn't asked yet and answers you had not given?
Andrew told me what questions he was going to ask in the morning before the interviews, and he gave me quote-unquote hints as to what he wanted me to say.
Well, Mr. Durst, wouldn't you agree that the whole point of what Andrew Jarecki was doing was to try and surprise you with questions you weren't expecting? Isn't that what the entire series of interviews was about?
The audience was supposed to see that the questions were a surprise. I was not to tell the audience that the questions and answers had essentially been scripted.
I just want to ask you, I know you're saying that that's what happened. Just want you to ask you for a second. Just listening to what you just said, does that sound in any way credible to you? If someone told you that, would you believe it?
Yes, it's credible, and that's what happened.
Now, I previously asked you why your siblings were not like this. And do you recall what you said?
I don't know what you mean by like this, and I do not recall what I said.
RD 358, March 15, 2015, page 75, line 22 to page 76, line 3.
This is the part of people 291.
The reason that people don't, we're taught, hey, you can't steal, or you have to follow this rule.
I didn't have to follow the rule.
Yeah,
Here's the line, you get to the end of the line, figure I'm going to get at the end of the line, and the things I want to do.
Now, so do you think that the way you were raised, your family, the money, is that what kind of created that part of you?
No, my siblings are not like that.
Mr. Durst, would you agree that in that exchange, you were basically confirming that, you know what, I don't have to follow the rules. You said it straight out. I'm not going to go to the end of the line. I've got things to do. That's what you said, right?
I said I was not going to wait on line. I was going to take a bottle of water.
Well, but you didn't apply it to just the bottle of water or one line. You were saying that in your life you said, yeah, I didn't have to follow the rules. What did you mean by that?
Where do I?
It's line 24.
So I don't really feel that way.
Well, that's not what I asked you. I asked you why you said it and what you meant by it.
I guess at the time I felt like that.
Okay, and so I'm asking you, what did you mean when you said it? You have a very good memory, so I'm just asking you, you said this, you've heard yourself say it. What did you mean by it?
I think it speaks for itself.
Well, Mr. Durst, I asked you a moment ago if you were the kind of person who felt they didn't have to follow the rules, and you said, no, that's not correct. You made the statement, I didn't have to follow the rules. It does not speak for itself. It's a declarative statement. It doesn't give a reason. Why did you say I didn't have to follow the rules?
Object to the former question, all of that, comment on what had been said.
I'll strike the comment, and this question may remain. Answer the question. Why did you say I didn't have to follow the rules?
I guess I said it because I felt like that at the time.
And when you said this, you were, this is in 2015, so you were already 72 years old, approximately, just before your 72nd birthday. So does that mean that basically, until that point in your life, until age 71, you basically felt, I don't have to follow the rules?
I'm trying to remember when we had this conversation.
March 15, 2015.
So that was after I was under arrest
Yes,
in New Orleans,
yes.
trying to get you to do a plea bargain with me.
So does that mean then, can you explain, how would this relate to a plea bargain? I'm trying to understand that.
Well, there's nothing illegal about saying I don't have to follow the rules. Whatever I was doing in that court, that room with you, had to do with my doing a plea bargain. I thought it was what you wanted to hear.
All right, let me continue. Would you agree, Mr. Durst, that you tend to be a very self-involved, egocentric, and maybe even narcissistic person?
Objection on the question,
It's,
Overruled.
I don't really know what an egocentric person does.
well, would you agree, Mr. Durst, that, instead of using words, I'll just try to explain, would you agree that, in essence, you are somebody who is very concerned, and pretty much only concerned, with Bob Durst and Bob Durst's needs? That's what you focus on.
I focus on Bob Durst because I am Bob Durst.
Well, is it fair to say
There are
that,
times when I focus on others.
I'm sorry, is it fair to say, though, that there are other people who you've known in your life who are much more concerned with other people? Have you known people like that?
No,
Well, haven't you at previous times said that your sister Wendy, as an example, is somebody who was kind and concerned with others?
my sister Wendy is the only person in the country who can take the position under oath that her Wendy lies are not like other people's lies because she is too naive and unknowledgeable to have any idea what she is saying.
Well, haven't you said before that, in fact, Kathy was a very unselfish, altruistic person?
I would agree with that.
And would you agree that you are not that way?
I am more selfish than Kathy.
Would you also describe yourself as a very private person?
Extremely private.
And for that reason, you would agree that you would never give anyone a key to your personal residence because that's your space, right?
Right.
And in fact, you were asked about this during our March 15, 2015 interview. Do you recall that?
No.
361, 315, page 79, line 22 to page 80, line 2.
And Your Honor, this is part of People's 291. Yes.
Now, one of the things interesting, I got to know you, you're a very private person. You agree? Yeah. And so, I knew the Galveston story wasn't true when, as soon as I heard you say that you gave Morris a key to the place. I knew right there you would never give him a key.
I never give anybody a key unless they were, very common.
When I originally asked you about it, and you agreed that you're very personal, very private person, and even today when you said you're an extremely private person, you weren't thinking about, when you answered that, how that would relate to your story about the key with Morris, were you?
No.
And I'm just going to ask, Mr. Durst, the whole story about you giving Morris a key to your place so that he could watch TV while you're gone, that's not true, is it?
That is entirely true.
You would agree, though, given your prior answers, that the idea that a selfish person like yourself, someone who's concerned, as you said, about Bob Durst, would even be thinking about, wow, what's it going to be like for Morris when I'm gone and he can't watch my TV? Would you agree that that would be more typical of what you would think you would view and analyze the situation?
I gave Morris a key to the $300 a month studio or efficiency apartment in Galveston, Texas, in which there was none of my personal property.
Right, he didn't ask you for the key, though. You volunteered it to him, correct?
I had loaned him the key in the past.
Right, but that had been done at your suggestion, correct?
Several times we would go someplace and he would be getting back to the apartment before I got back. I would give him the key so that he could get in before I got back.
Get into your place to watch TV, correct?
Correct.
My question to you is, I know you're saying that's what happened. Will you concede that given your egocentricity and your self-involvement, that is definitely unusual for you to be thinking and to be concerned about whether Morris is going to get back to your apartment and not be able to watch TV?
Renting a $300 a month apartment in Galveston disguised as a woman was extremely unusual for me.
Well, it wasn't that unusual. You did the same thing in New Orleans, right?
Correct.
So let me just ask you this. If I ask the question again, will you answer the question I'm asking, or are you just not going to answer it? If you tell me you're not going to answer it, I'll just move on.
Overruled.
I'm trying to clarify.
Overruled.
Thank you.
I have no idea what the question is.
Okay, I'm going to ask you the question. You're saying you gave Morris a key because you were concerned about his ability to be able to watch TV when you were gone, correct?
Correct.
You've also said that you're an extremely private person, and you've conceded that you're also selfish, correct?
I think you are creating words in my mouth.
What word did I create?
Extremely private person has nothing to do with the studio apartment I rented in Galveston, Texas.
Okay, so my question is, you have agreed that you are an extremely private person, correct or incorrect?
I agree.
You have agreed that you are, fair to say, you're an extremely selfish person, correct?
I would delete the extremely and say I'm a selfish person.
So given you are an admittedly very extremely private person and also selfish person, would you agree that it would seem to be out of character for you to be concerned about some neighbor's ability to watch television when you're not there?
No.
All right, I want to talk about your burping for a moment. Do you know what I'm referring to?
We want to talk about my burping?
Yes, I want to talk about your burping, your belching. Do you understand what I'm referring to?
I periodically burp.
Well, you have a habit of burping in front of other people, and you would agree that that burping is something you have control over, correct?
Excuse me, 1101A.
Was it?
Objection, 1101A, proper character
Okay, let's,
assassination.
character sense.
Yeah, that's, none of those are objections.
Eleven oh one.
It's not an objection.
Let's just address it.
All right.
Let's address it. We'll go sideways.
Hey, ma'am.
Waving at me. May I find out what it
All right, yeah, you may. See what if you need something private.
No, step away.
Okay.
You want me to turn the mic off? You want me to turn the
Can you
microphone
get
off?
me a bottle of water?
Before?
No, that's actually mine, but he can have that one. It's up.
Here, I'll get one.
We'll get a fresh one.
There's a fresh one here, Dave,
That's
unopened.
fresh.
Okay?
Do you want me to open it, or do you want to?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll put this right here. While he's doing that, Your Honor, it's gonna be RD 358, March 15, 2015, page 75, line 22 to page 76, line 3.
Oh, three. I'm sorry.
Hold on, sorry.
No, it's two. It's not. I have it wrong.
It's our number 358. Hold on.
Usually when I call him out, he just has them ready to go.
He goes 291, sorry.
291. Okay.
He went out of order.
The reason that people don't, we're taught, hey, you can't steal, or you have to follow this rule.
I didn't have to follow you.
Yeah,
Here's the line, you get to the end of the line. You get to the end of the line, things I want to do.
Now, so do you think that the way you were raised, your family, the money, is that what kind of created that part of you?
Let me stop that. I repeated, it's the wrong, I called out the wrong That's what we already played. It should have been, my apologies, Art.
Let me guess, it's 4:39.
No, it's 4:03. Wait, no, wait a minute.
Bingo.
Wait a minute, hold on a minute. Bingo. Let's see. Yeah, it's 4:39. All right. Sorry about that. That's going to be 12-12-10, page 231, line 22 to page 233, line 8.
It's from People's 269 on the transcript of the page 128.
Was there anything that happened that made you aware of that? Oh, right, I gotta tone this down.
No, I became aware, I'm in the business, there was nothing they could do if I did it, because what are they gonna do, to fire me? Which would have been all right with me. When I left the company and I was out doing stuff, I right away realized, you're not Robert Durst, the Durst organization anymore. You're gonna have to tone these things down and stop belching. And I kept talking to myself, that went on. But I made the belching go away and I wouldn't be totally impolite to people. I would swear in the meetings, I would use bad words and enjoy it, and I saw a reaction.
Did your dad ever put his foot down? Did he ever say, okay?
No, yes, he put his foot down. Stop doing that. You can't keep doing that. He would take me aside and he was, you can't keep doing that. Just stop the belching, stop talking to these people like they're the maid. You can't do that. I talk to the maids much better than I spoke to the businessy people. But the next step was to say, you can't come in anymore. You're fired. That's just what he did not want, but he wanted me to change and to keep working there.
So it was in some ways a means of protest.
Rebellion.
But
I can do what I want. There's nothing anybody can do about it. Tough.
Mr. Durst, does that kind of sum up what your attitude was?
Again, objection was not why.
Was it? Does that sum up what your attitude was, Mr. Durst?
Yes.
You would agree, it's not that you didn't have control over these things, your burping, your stealing, your swearing. It's just that you enjoyed kind of doing what you wanted and you liked the reactions, correct?
Objection 352.
I don't know that I enjoyed the reaction.
You heard yourself just say, in essence, you enjoyed the reaction, correct? That's what you just said. Let me make it easier, Mr. Durst. The quote was, you were asked, and I mean, did you enjoy the idea that you'd be in a meeting and would disrupt the meeting? And you responded, yes, I did enjoy it. Then you were asked, by the way, in that, you were asked, tell me in a full sentence. And you said, well, I would be in a meeting, I would be trying to impress upon everybody, and I thought it was a complete waste of time and silly, and I would just let out a big belch. No apology, no I'm sorry, no nothing. Just, keep going. That's what I'm asking you about.
Hard for me to remember how I felt.
All right, let me move on to my next area. Let's talk about the Durst organization. When did you start working there?
1973.
Would it be fair to say that you did not have a strong work ethic during your time there?
I have a very strong work ethic.
So that's not what I asked you. Did you have a strong work ethic while you were working at the Durst organization?
I'm not sure I know what a strong work ethic is.
Are you asking me to define what I mean by strong work ethic?
Strong work ethic.
I'm asking Mr. Durst if you treated that job in that you would show up for work and work very hard and try to accomplish the tasks that that job demanded. Is that how you approached it?
Some of it.
RD 035 121110, page 37, lines 13 through 20.
You're objecting to the question?
Objective. 1101A, 352, and cumulative.
Okay. Overruled.
Your Honor, this is from people. On transcript, it would be page 11.
I would show up for a meeting with 15 guys, 2 hours late, stoned, wearing a t-shirt and a jock or whatever, and let everybody know that the way to waste a life is to sit around a big table and talk about gibberish documents all day long. And I was there infrequently. I'd never go in the morning. Or an early, arrival for me would be after lunch.
Does that refresh your memory about the work ethic you had at the Durst organization?
Records reflect that on the screen was a part of that movie. It didn't have anything to do with what.
I'm sorry.
It's
That was Mr. Durst speaking.
about the DVD commentary, correct?
So
No, it's on the other side of the screen, it's the movie.
If I could clarify, this is a previous exhibit,
Yeah.
portion of a previous exhibit. We just played back what was previously shown. It's exactly what was previously admitted.
That is
thank-
repetition.
okay, thank you. That's overruled.
Can you answer my question, Mr. Durst?
What is your question?
You've just watched that clip. Would you agree that that demonstrates that you did not have a strong work ethic, or really any work ethic, when you were at the Durst organization?
I had a strong work ethic with the things that I wanted to do.
Right. Would you agree, Mr. Durst, that that's kind of how you've approached life? If there's something you want to do, you will do it. And if there's something that you don't want to do, you won't.
No, that is not how I approach life.
All right. By the way, the last clip that I played for you, there was a part where Mr. Jarecki said to you, repeat in a full sentence. Is that what you mean by him telling you what to say?
No.
All right, I want to talk about Kathy for a moment. Do you miss her?
Yes.
Tell me about her.
When I think about Kathy, I miss Kathy.
What was she like?
She was very lively, and up until the last year of our marriage, she was very happy.
Would you agree she was a very bright young woman?
Yes,
Beautiful?
yes.
Would you agree that she was close to and devoted to her family?
She was close to Mary Hughes. The other two sisters and her brother, she was not so close to.
She was very close to her mom, though, as well, right?
Sure.
And would you agree that she was really excited about becoming a doctor?
Yes.
Would you further agree that, given the humble beginnings that she had come from, she was really accomplishing things in her life?
Yes.
Would you also agree that the Kathy Durst you know would never have simply taken off this close to graduating medical school?
I would agree with that.
Would you also agree that Kathy Durst never would have abandoned her family and friends to never talk to them again?
Yes.
And if I asked you on a scale of 1 to 100, with 1 being, you know what? Yeah, I can absolutely see Kathy abandoning her family in medical school, never to be heard from again, and 100 being, that is an impossibility. What number would you give it?
I would give it 100.
Right. Tell me about your relationship with Kathy. If I were to ask you to describe it, we'll start at the beginning.
We were in love.
Would you characterize your relationship as an equal partnership?
No, I was always dominant.
And in fact, you have said repeatedly, as an example, you said in March 15, 2015, page 53, lines 9 through 17, I was the dominant person in the marriage. Question, and part of it was that she was really young when you met her. You know, I think you married her when 19. You responded, well, I had the money. I was 9 years older. I had the education. I was calling the shots, as Kathy would say. Does that fairly describe the relationship?
It depends what you mean by calling the shots.
Well, those were your words, so you explain what you meant.
I guess I'm talking about where we would go to dinner. Not so much where we would live, because Kathy found the house in South Salem, and Kathy also found the apartment at 12 East 86th Street.
When you and Kathy were married on your 30th birthday, on April 12th, 1973, you agree that was only after she had agreed, you had told her that if you were not happy in 3 years or so, that you guys would divorce, correct?
No.
What's not correct about that? Is that not something that you told her?
We never talked about getting divorced.
No. You agree Kathy was the one who pushed to get married, correct?
No, we both wanted to get married.
Is it fair to say, Mr. Durst, that you wanted to get married, but only on your terms, regarding whether you would have children, where you would live, who would make the decisions? Is that a fair statement?
No, I just said Kathy found the house in South Salem, and Kathy chose the rental apartment at 12 East 86th Street.
Would you agree that you were not a supportive husband?
No, I would not agree to that.
Have you characterized your relationship with Kathy as her, quote, marrying up?
No.
RD 602, page 277, lines 16 through 20.
501A, objection.
Overruled.
This is a portion of People's 269 on the transcript, pages 38 and 40.
Oodles of education. She had zilch. Girl from a small town without, you know, no big deal. I mean, for me, I guess you would say I was marrying beneath me or something like that, or she was marrying up or well or something like that.
That's your voice, right?
Yeah, that's my voice, and I said that, but I never felt that way.
Did Andrew Jarecki make you say that?
No.
Did you really view your relationship with Kathy Durst as her marrying up?
501A.
Overruled.
I don't feel that way, no.
Would you agree that you have repeatedly attempted to minimize or diminish Kathy's accomplishments?
I would absolutely disagree. I would brag about Kathy's accomplishments.
During your interviews with Andrew Jarecki, you downgraded her academic record and in essence said that you did not think she was a very good candidate for medical school, correct?
When she first told me that she wanted to go become a doctor and apply to medical school, I told her it was going to be very tough because people in medical school tend to have gone to real good colleges and universities, and that even though she was getting good grades at Western Connecticut State College, it's very possible that the medical colleges would be uninterested in a student going to Western Connecticut State College.
Would you call that being a supportive husband?
That was me trying to be realistic.
Would you agree that even during your testimony at this trial, that you chose to bring up the issue during your direct examination, that the only reason Kathy got into Einstein Medical School was because of family connections?
I do think she got into Albert Einstein Medical School because my dad reached out to the largest donor at Albert Einstein Medical School and told him that his daughter-in-law had applied to medical school. Kathy applied to 15 medical schools. Albert Einstein was probably the best, if not the best, one of the top two. Kathy got into no medical school except Albert Einstein.
Would you agree that Kathy was a nearly straight-A student in college?
Yes.
Would you agree that she was the first person in her family to go to college?
Yes.
Did you hear the testimony of Dr. Marian Watlington? Do you remember her?
The psychologist?
No, No, Marion Watlington was the teacher.
Yeah, she has the one living in Bermuda, the poor baby.
Yes. Do you recall her testimony?
I do.
Do you recall her describing your missing wife as the star of her class and an outstanding medical school candidate?
I don't recall that.
I want you to assume for a moment that that is what Dr. Watlington testified to in this trial. Would you agree that she probably, as a doctor herself and as a professor, would have a better understanding of what a qualified medical school candidate would be than you do?
I remember Dr. Watlington testified that she thought Kathy had had a nervous breakdown. Dr. Watlington also testified that Kathy said she was afraid Seymour Durst was going to kill her. In terms of medical school, the vast majority of the students at Albert Einstein got over 90% in what's called the MCATs, the Medical College Admission Test. Kathy was at 60%.
So, Mr. Durst, you started off by saying you didn't really remember her testimony. Dr. Watlington didn't remember that she called Kathy an outstanding medical school candidate, didn't remember that she said Kathy was the star of her class, but yet you seem to remember two things that you think help your case, and you rattled them off pretty quickly. Was that intentional on your part?
Yes.
To the statement, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Your Honor, I would just ask that.
Overruled.
No, but I'm just asking that, just so I'm able to respond for the future, court's overruling, but can you please ask counsel to give a grounds? They just say objection, and then I can't.
Comment on the testimony.
So let's, I'm almost
keep
ready
going.
to take a break. Are you ready to do that, or do you need this?
No,
Let's have this one
fine.
answered. Let's have this
The
answered.
last question.
Pardon? Oh, okay.
Is there an oral answer?
No, I wanted to at least an answer to the question before we break. For overruled.
If you're reading, I just want to make sure you understand we're waiting for an answer, Mr. Durst. No rush, just want to make sure that you understand.
Your question is no longer on the screen.
Okay,
I don't know what the question is.
Sure, let me ask it again. When I asked you about Dr. Watlington and her comments, you said you did not remember her saying that Kathy was an outstanding medical school candidate. You said you did not remember her saying that Kathy was a star of her class. What you responded was, is you brought up two things that she said, which were completely unrelated to my question, but which arguably, it would appear you believe help your case. So I'm asking you, is that an accident that that's how you answered my question, or was that an intentional plan on your part to, in essence, get the information you wanted out rather than answering the question I asked?
Objection.
Overruled.
Comment on the testimony.
I overruled your objection. He's asking it again so it can be answered. Don't do that, Mr. DeGuerin.
It certainly was not an intentional plan. I had no idea you were going to bring up Dr. Watlington. But once you opened the door and brought up Dr. Watlington, I wanted to focus on what Dr. Watlington had said.
You wanted to focus on what Dr. Watlington had said that had nothing to do with the question I was asking you. You wanted to focus on what you thought helped your case, correct?
Correct.
Again, it's a comment. Object to the comment.
Overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. This works at this time the court wants to break.
Yes, let's take our,
Thank you.
do we have an answer there? Let's see.
Yes.
That's correct.
Correct, okay.
Thank
Do
you.
not converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with this case. Do not form or express any opinion on the case. 11:15, please. Count. Jurors have left the courtroom. We're on the record, Mr. Chesnoff. All right, I want to address these series of objections we've heard here. First of all, I am not going to recognize an objection unless it is a valid and contemporaneous objection. In other words, it must be at the time the question is asked, and it must specify grounds that are in our California evidence code. Let me note that questions that may tend to bear on character also are admissible to attack credibility. California's Proposition 8 makes all relevant evidence admissible, and limitations on impeachment are really not limited unless there is, if it does have a tendency and reason to reduce the credibility of the witness, this evidence is admissible unless it is substantially more prejudicial than probative. None of these questions are substantially more prejudicial than probative. I'm citing People versus Harris, 47 Cal 3rd, 1047 at page 1081 and 1082. So these sorts of all of these were admissible to prove credibility. Oh, and in some instances, they were admissible also on evidence of motive and intent, particularly in the domestic violence context, where there has been controversy and over the issue of whether or not there was domestic violence against Kathy Durst, whether there was motive and intent to kill her, as illustrated by aspects of the domestic violence which are admissible under 1101B, as we have litigated several times. Anything else you wish to add to your record? You wish to make any further record before we take a break?
Your Honor,
Yes.
this is an inquiry of the court.
Yes.
And I think that the prelude to the question, long and rambling and argumentative, is improper. I feel it's my obligation to object. Are you telling me not to object?
No. I am. I understand that, and Mr. Lewin does tend to preface his questions, and sometimes they are on the verge of being argumentative. For the purpose of an argumentative objection, I will incorporate the preface into the question, but he's on the line of that. Something is argumentative really if the question itself poses an inference. In other words, whether it if it suggests a let's see, let me think of the best way to define what is argumentative. It sometimes very pointed and
Argumentative.
is not argumentative. It may seem and feel argumentative, yet it is not. Mr. Lewin can confront Mr. Durst with very specific examples that are supported by the evidence, not necessarily his testimony. It can be any testimony. He can confront him with that. He can characterize that evidence fairly, but a reaction to an answer is what I do see as problematic sometimes. The answer may not be satisfactory to the people, and the people may ask a different question or may repeat the question. This is cross-examination without commenting unless it's essential for understanding the question. So that's a fine line there. I don't necessarily have to allow counsel to give prefaces to questions, but I find that sometimes can orient the witness to the inquiry. So to the extent it's useful to the witness to understand it rather than to make a point to the jury that you're dissatisfied or you feel that the answer was wrong or was a lie, you may not suggest that to the jury with a preface to your question. Do you understand?
Yes, and I would just add that I think the court's aware of this. The questions that I've been asking Mr. Durst, I ask him a question. He lies, completely denies it, says it's wrong, I don't do that. So then I have to, in my preface to the question, I have to basically, in essence, say, well, you've said X, Y, Z before, and then I end up playing the clip, et cetera. So
You have done that, and I would not have sustained an objection in those instances, but there have been times when I have sustained, or I would have sustained objections because of the nature of the prefatory comment. So it is a fine line. I'm asking you to mind that
Will
fine
do.
line.
Thank you, Your
Recess.
Sean?